Alright, I guess it's going to be long video Sunday. A lot of videos to make. Anyway, so we'll start with this, whatever guy. Amadeus, even though he talks incredibly slow and is tedious and annoying. There, see? Oh, that's horrible. Oh, a critique of a person's performance in their video. How outrageous, can't do that. Anyway, yeah, this whole argument is just so, it should be beneath even response, because it's just so petty and ludicrous. That somehow you've all been cheated in the argument. You can't make the argument because Gary will call you a fucktard. I mean, I'm sure there's probably all kinds of documented cases where, you know, Einstein just ran away from an argument because somebody called him a, you know, old smelly fart. This is just so idiotic. You're talking about how you've got all this integrity, and this is the kind of stuff that just completely, you know, you stalls your entire intellectual capacity. I mean, it's just such bullshit. Most of my videos, I'm not talking to a person, I'm talking about a subject. And if somebody responds to me and they say something just so disgusting and repulsive, and then when they're patronizing again, you know, all these little subtle insults, like, you know, I just love you. People are always talking this rhetoric. Oh, Gary, you're very intelligent, but you're a complete asshole. I mean, it's just such goddamn word gamey manipulation. So you can insult people, but as long as you do it in your subtle little, you know, fanny packy way, it's all okay. It's the same thing. Because you don't have the guts to just say the four-letter word, well, that's your problem, in my opinion. But you're not going to win this argument with this kind of ammunition with anybody who has any true intellectual integrity. I've made the argument, okay? The argument isn't made out of you're a fucktard. The argument's made out of the all those other extra minutes, the 99% of the other content that you're completely ignoring. So anyway, on with the show.
Hey, Shawnee. I enjoyed your video.
Well, of course,
and,
it gave you a quite nice acid licking.
Especially the part about the idea of the intellectual messiah.
Again, you know, it's more of this idea that somehow it's a cult of belief systems, that people can't make their own arguments independent, and of course they can. Again, it's about the argument, and instead of engaging the argument, you want to engage in some kind of lie that somehow somebody's cheating you. They're using super messiah powers. You know, I'm using my special super messiah powers to somehow disable your ability to make a cogent and intelligent response. And you can't do that. So that's the bottom line.
No way that people view people like Amendum and the way he might view himself. And
even that, the subtlety in this argument, like somehow this is what we're supposed to be talking about. So the subject isn't the subject is instead this nonsense. I mean, you've made it clear. I mean, so this is the irony of this. Deb talks about how Shawnee has got the biggest heart in the world, and then Shawnee is defending the philosophy of a guy who declares himself an amoralist. He doesn't believe in morality. He doesn't believe there's any ethical right and wrong. He believes he should do whatever the fuck he wants. And if he gets off on killing dogs slowly with a baseball bat, he thinks he should have the liberty to do that. That's Shawnee's big heart. Okay? She's advocating a philosophy that has no heart. So make sense out of that, people, please. Make sense out of that complete nonsense. That it's directly contradictory terminology.
You get too personal, like insulting him directly. I more want to discuss that kind of archetype of person.
Again, yeah, see, this is just more of the game. So you don't have the balls to just say asshole or fucknut. Instead, you're going to play some game. Oh, well, let's talk about your archetype. I could talk about your archetype, too. You know, you're a little weaselly college student of, you know, well, I won't even get into it, but, you know, we can all play that game. So you want me to measure you by the way you look and how you speak, but that would be bullshit. I don't need to do that. All I have to do is play your video and let you open your mouth and talk your rubbish and point out how your rubbish is just that rubbish.
And the way people view that type of person. It all factors into a growing trend, which I think is the popularity of what I would call a cult of reason.
Yeah, now that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? So let's just, what we could say, a cult of anything, couldn't you? Cult of intelligence, intelligence-atiation. We could just make up words, right? A cult of what? You know, I mean, it's just nonsense. You have to deal with the arguments as they come, okay? And they're either arguments that can be argued, or they're arguments that can't. Now, you expect somebody to prove to you that suffering matters. Well, most people are going to argue that, well, no, didn't you do the experiment? Didn't you don't you have sentience inside your own consciousness? Don't you know what it is? And you can't project that all the other humans have exactly the same consciousness? But no, that's the cult of reason. The cult of reason is obligating you to do the common sense logic and apply the probabilistic certainty almost that yes, your consciousness isn't unique, that consciousness is a shared, a quality other things share, and that they have a capacity to be harmed just like you have a capacity to be harmed. Not very complex logic, yet this guy's not capable of it. And so he's going to call it a cult because he can't figure out that suffering matters.
Now, I used to be a young skeptic in an environment where there were some religious people that...
Yeah, the skeptic for the sake of being skeptical. What the fuck is the point of that? Skepticism doesn't mean anything, especially in the 20th century. Skepticism meant something when we didn't have Hubble telescopes and we didn't have microscopes and we didn't have all these instruments of observation. Well, then you had to be skeptical because everything was just a story. Everything was just testimony from some human being that you could doubt. Well, guess what? You can't doubt the science anymore. You can't doubt the evidence for evolution anymore. It's not doubtable. It's a fact, okay? They're physical facts now that build these truths. And so this game of skepticism is just a pile of crap, too.
Mostly a lot of people who didn't give a fuck. But I thought it was really cool. And I read my Richard Dawkins. And I read my Sam Harris. And I read my Christopher Hitchens.
Right, so now he's like being patronizing to three people who are, first, very good writers. They're very good argument makers in their writings. They back up what they say with some sort of argument, and he's trivializing it, like somehow he knows better than those three.
And I thought I was a cool, liberal guy. And, whenever I encountered a conservative or a Christian, I showed them what was what.
I bet you didn't. Yeah, I bet you didn't. I bet you never won an argument in your life.
Them that I was smarter, more logical. I read my news sources, and I read my books.
And do you have any evidence of your argumentation? I mean, can I go to some blog somewhere where you were arguing? Because I'd love to see some of this.
I knew about arguments and logic. And, I was so well.
Listen to this. I mean, now he's taking words like reason, rationality, and logic and turning those into negative qualities. And now he's going to use the word dogma, just to top it off.
I had a brilliant vocabulary. I mean, come on. Who were these people to challenge me? You know who they were to challenge me? Just regular people, like I was.
Yeah, so now we're at this all opinions are equal thing. So if you're completely you have no information, you don't know anything, you never took a biology class in your life, all of a sudden you're qualified to argue with Dawkins about biological evolution because you're all just people, and so it's all equal. There is no such thing as being more qualified. Okay, there's no such thing as a more qualified opinion, and there's certainly no such thing as something like where what do you mean? You would put your argument to a test and actually have to make the argument? Yeah, let's see you do that. Let's make your counter argument and somehow make one that's actually literally correct.
we were on different levels. I just happen to value logic and reason, and they happen to value emotion and intuition.
And you don't see the difference between those two things. So valuing your own prejudice. Let's say I just don't like black people. I don't like the way they look, don't like the way they act, don't like anything about black people. And so I should just accept my racism and be a racist because I emotionally have a problem. Okay, it's like I don't like chocolate ice cream, so I should, pass a law against chocolate ice cream or something. I should take my emotions or my preferences or my prejudices or my conditioning, and I should apply that as an intellectual standard. That somehow it's equal. I mean, this again is just such bullshit. What rational, logical person thinks their biology, their stomach, or their liver, or their heart is smarter than their brain? I mean, it's just such a silly argument.
For me, logic and reason are the better judges of a lot of situations, but for some people they aren't. And on top...
Well, you just said that was who you used to be, but again, you're not making logical or reasonable arguments, so I don't see how you have any appreciation for the superiority of being logical.
On top of that, the new cult of reason, which, by the way, is no means a fringe group, it's very popular. It's...
Where? Statistically, in the United States of America? I don't think so.
It's not the unpopular opinion. People who think they're these reasonable, rational atheists and liberals think that they're revolutionaries. They're not, especially not in academic circles. They're the majority. It's so easy. It's the easiest position to take.
But what is your position again? Your position is this illogical position that says there is no meaning in the world. Nothing has value. And somebody's supposed to take you seriously.
Now, being easy doesn't make it wrong, but what I think people should realize is they're not being martyrs. They're not being rebels.
Well, why would they be doing it for that reason? So again, you're saying that Hitchens believes what he believes because he's just being a rebel, and Dawkins is doing that too. He's just being a rebel, right? That's all he's doing. He's just being a rebel for the sake of being a rebel. He's not being a scientist. He's not being somebody who has a passion for understanding the truth and how things work. So again, and you know better, you fucking little turd.
Just maintaining the status quo as far as I see it. Now, in America, of course, there are a lot of conservatives and a lot of religious people. But speaking to my own experience in a university, in a very liberal province.
Oh, right. So you'll make generalizations about the world, and then you'll say, oh, wait, I'm not talking about the world after all. I'm just talking about my university in, Canada.
And the people who think that they're radicals are just hipster kids who like to smoke a lot of pot and read liberal news sources and talk about how much of a free thinker they are. It's not a big deal.
Well, what do you watch? I mean, what's your... You do the Fox News thing now? Is that what you are? I mean, you're talking like liberal is somehow a bad word. So I wonder where that comes from.
And the pretension is immense.
I mean, the irony of him even using the word pretension is just so... I mean, it fills the universe, doesn't it? I mean, this guy who just belittled Dawkins, Hitchens, and what's his face, is talking about being a pretentious... I mean, yeah, I'm sorry. My brain has to restart now. I have to do a reboot because that's just such a preposterous statement out of his mouth.
And it leads to support of these characters who are so self-important. I think they're so far above anyone with a slightly differing viewpoint.
Oh, where are you going to find that with Harris? Where are you even going to find it with Hitchens? Hitchens makes arguments. Yeah, he'll take on comers and he'll argue. I don't like Hitchens. I don't like him as a person. I don't like his politics. But yeah, he's in the game. He makes a fair argument. But where's this idea that he's somehow in some ivory tower or something or demanding some sort of special considerations? There's no such thing. This is just weasel talk. This is just talking out of your ass.
And it leads to a cultish following, a cultish belief in oneself and their infallibility.
And this is another kind of bullshit argument, that every time you can't defeat somebody's argument, you'll claim that they're, possessed by some sort of false confidence. So, yeah, you could study evolution for 10 years, you could read all the literature, and if you draw a conclusion, no, you're not allowed to draw conclusions. No, we all have to stay wishy-washy and uncertain and unconvinced because somehow you think it's still 4,000 years ago and that we still don't have any evidence. No, in the last 100 years we've acquired, 1,000, 10,000 times more information than we had in all the previous human history. We have a lot of information now. We can actually start drawing some conclusions. And a real simple conclusion is to draw the conclusion that there are other sentient mammals on Earth, and they evolved the same way we got here. They have a capacity to be harmed, and any idiot who can't recognize that deserves to be called an idiot.
And really, it leads to a dogma of rationality, like something.
Now, what sense does that make? A dogma of rationality. Rationality is a process, okay, where you apply logic, where you're not allowed to be self-contradictory. There's certain rules of logic that be applied that define rationality. By its very nature, it can't be a dogma because it involves a thinking process. It involves being skeptical and demanding evidence. So right there, how can it possibly be a dogma? It's exactly the opposite word.
Things deemed irrational, then there's no other argument could ever come against it.
Again, you're just this weaselly kind of nonsense where I'm claiming there's an argument for UFOs. I don't have the argument, I don't have the evidence, but you have to just concede the possibility. I mean, that's just nonsense. I don't have to believe somebody's argument that Hansel and Gretel created the universe. I don't have to give it any credibility. I don't have to do anything until they provide an argument, a logical explanation for why that can possibly make any sense whatsoever. So make your point and make a sensible argument, and don't be don't play this coward's game where because you can't make a logical, rational, reasonable argument that somehow somebody is too cement-headed and they're not receptive to your logic. Bullshit. You haven't been logical. That's not their fault. That's your bad.
If we have something following the logical rules of parsimony or something, it just can't be broken. It's just magically and religiously right.
So again, if you confine argument to the realm of reasonable premise, all right, where we're not going to pretend we're in the Matrix, we're not going to pretend, life, all the whole universe is just the figment of an imagination of a God who was created by a God who was created by the double God who was created by the triple God, or some other, logical nonsense. If we don't somehow concede the possibility of all this rubbish being true, that somehow we're breaking the rules. No, that's the rules of logic. Logic confines what is in the realm of reasonable. That's its whole function, is to separate the weeds from the flowers.
When we created our own religion, against mysticism, we created our own.
Do I have to even defend that argument? We've created this kind of dogma that says superstition is somehow invalid and that astrology isn't the truth. Yeah, what a scary dogma.
Mystical form of this beauteous and valid in and of itself system called logic. Sure, it produces results, but so does...
Yeah, sure, it produces results, but that's not even the measure, is it? So you don't even understand what logic is. Logic isn't about producing results. It's not about putting a smile on your face. It's about defining the truth, and that there are certain things. Aristotle will explain, some other people, there's certain rules that you have to obey, or you've violated logic, and one of those is you can't be self-contradictory.
As anything else, so do all systems. I mean, so does religion. Just not results we think are good sometimes.
Again, it's this results based. The idea is to define the truth. Okay, there's a truth out there. Now you think maybe there's multiple truths, so that's a premise where you've opened the door and said, no, I don't think there's a fixed material universe. I think everybody can make up their own truth, or is living in their own truth, or some other nonsense. Well, basically that's a non-starter for most logical people, because they're going to say, no, look, there's no evidence of any of that multiverse. There's no evidence that everybody else is living in a different universe. There's no evidence that we can all just make up our own truth. No, there are certain fixed facts. The world is not flat. The bear god isn't God. There's lots of things they'll say that, yes, the evidence is in, we can convict. That is not a truth, okay? You don't want to do that, and then you still want to participate in conversation. Well, it just doesn't work that way. There's no point in me talking to a 6-year-old, and there's certainly no point in me talking to a retarded 6-year-old. And you are putting yourself lower than that standard.
And I'm ranting because I am drunk. But,
and so should we draw some conclusions? Okay, you can't handle life. You have to get drunk to make a video. So we should make something out of that. I think that's probably more evidence of something than saying fucktard. Yeah, that's probably more evidence of some sort of emotional dysfunction than saying fucktard. Let's say drinking, saying fucktard. Yeah, drinking's probably more symptomatic of a problem. And another joke for Shawnee, right? Shawnee, who's all fucking paranoid about these alcoholics, and here her little idol here, her new messiah, oh, he's a drunk.
I hope you get my point. I have to distance myself with people who hold very similar views to me, because at the same time as being atheist, as being liberal people, they're also dogmatic people.
Prove it. Give me the atheist dogma. Write it down somewhere what exactly the dogma is. And so if you're going to argue that something that's so substantiated, like the theory of evolution, tons and tons of evidence, and so it's a dogma if they accept it now as a premise. So the premise for conversation is that we evolved over 4 billion years or so on planet Earth. And so if they're demanding now that, well, that's sort of the premise for conversation. So you want to talk about how something's relevant to something else. Yeah, well, that's one of the premises. And if you have some other theory of a unicorn or leprechauns or, Tinkerbell or whatever your theory is, well, if you want us to fix the premise or change the premise, then provide your evidence. Or otherwise, yeah, this is the foundation for conversation. I'm really not going to talk to a flat earther about anything. Okay, if you think the world is flat, you're kind of out of the game now.
People who refuse to consider alternate opinions and look down upon anyone who doesn't have their opinion.
Again, that's just crap. I mean, so these people that you've decided, Dawkins and Hitchens and Harris, have all engaged in debates with people. They're all receptive to the argument. They'll say, yes, bring it on, and I'll show you where you're wrong. And somehow that's a crime. They're not allowed to do that. They're not allowed to defend what they're stating is an evidentially well-established theory. Okay, that there's just no counter-argument, and they can demonstrate that. There's no rational alternative explanation, and you just don't like that truth. And so you just play this little sissy game where you say that somehow it's inappropriate for somebody to add 1 plus 1 and come up with 2, and they're just not allowed to do that. That somehow they've broken a rule because they're being too rigid and requiring 1 and 1 to equal 2.
And I think John Stuart Mill said it best when he said that if you don't allow yourself to have a differing opinion, however true your belief might be.
Again, so again, it's not that you didn't make a convincing argument. It's that they're not allowing themselves to have a differing opinion. So that's just such a cop-out. I mean, when I don't convince somebody of something, I don't automatically say, well, they're not allowing themselves to have an alternative opinion. What I say is, I just didn't make a persuasive enough argument. I can see the logic. It's right here in front of me. And so all I have to find now is what little piece of that argument they're not accepting. I mean, obviously it all adds up to me. I have the 3, the 7 divided by 4. The math just adds up when I put the logical equation together in my head. And somehow when I conveyed it to them, somehow one of those numbers got messed up because they came up with the wrong answer. So I have to figure out where I made my mistake in translating it first, and then I can try to figure out what they changed maybe. Maybe they changed something. All right, but this is just a cop-out to say it's always the person who isn't convinced by your mush that somehow it's their fault, and it's not your fault for making an ineffective, weak, lame argument.
It's a dead dogma. It's not a living truth anymore.
Again, this is just rhetoric, a dead dogma versus a living truth. That's just mush. It's just fairy dust mush. It doesn't mean anything, and it certainly doesn't mean anything unless you provide an example of what truth you put in those categories. What statement are you qualifying as a dead dogma? So why don't you tell us exactly what you think is a dead dogma? That suffering matters? Is that one of your dead dogmas?
And that's what I feel like people like Amanda might be doing, having dead dogmas.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, and Mendham is here for the argument. Have you made an argument? No. All you talk about is how Mendham has this defect or Mendham is this. You're just totally obsessed with the fucking messenger. You've totally ignored the 99% of the content, which is the argument part. You know, this part here where I'm fucking arguing the shit. That part you ignore. None of you people have ever had the balls to actually play my video and respond to my points. So, fuck you. Yeah, there's nothing else to say here. This is just weaselly bullshit. You don't like the fact that you lost, and so you're trying to find it. You're just making excuses. Oh, the ring was too small. And Mendham had superpowers. He took brass knuckles into the fight, or some kind of bullshit. It's all a bunch of lame, wimpy ass excuse making.
Perhaps, but dead truths, unliving truths.
Again, cite them. Have the balls to actually cite what you are saying is an unliving truth.
That aren't willing to go through the ringer. That aren't willing to have their defenses brought out by opposing views anymore.
You can't just opposing view. You have to opposing argument. You can't just say UFOs exist and that's it. You just walk away. UFOs exist and walk away. No, you have to actually demonstrate that there's some logical continuity to your theory of meaning. And so if you have a theory of meaning is that nothing means anything and that you think any individual should do whatever they want and it can have no meaningful consequence because there's nothing at jeopardy, there's nothing of value in the equation, that's your theory. I think I can persuade any rational human being that, no, there is something at value, at stake here, that sentience does change the game, and that the capacity to harm sentient creatures, animal or human, is important. I think most people can figure that out. I think most people will be persuaded by that argument. And so it's not their fault. They're not stupid enough to warp reality into the perversion that you've turned it into, where you've now disqualified everything. You've turned everything into meaningless matter.
The answer is simply, you're a fucktard. You're wrong because you're different.
Yeah, I've never made that argument. I've never said you're wrong because you're different. I've said you're wrong because you lack any kind of logical discipline, because you're not accepting what is just undeniable truth. There is no alternative reasonable explanation. There's no alternative, there's no logic, there's no rational statements that can be made to justify your theory that it doesn't matter if somebody takes a baseball bat and beats a dog to death for absolutely no accomplishment. That act would not in some way, in some discernible way, be decidedly negative. That in no universe that would ever be a good thing. The only possibility is for that to be a negative thing.
And that's the very same opinion, that's the very same rhetoric that was wielded against them when they were the unpopular belief.
Yeah, well, again, that's just a pile of crap, isn't it? Okay, there's one side that argues that from faith, from eyewitness testimony, so to speak, their own brain. They don't have evidence. They don't have any kind of statistics. They don't have anything to back up their God theory or something. So it's a completely incredible, nonsensical story. And the other side compiles evidence, makes a rational argument how it all ties together in the whole scheme of things. A big picture is drawn. So one person describes a puzzle with actual pieces, and the other person just says, no, it looks like this, and they don't have a single piece to the puzzle. They don't give you anything to build it out of except their impression.
It's despicable. And you got caught up in the wrong end of that, Sean.
Well, let's not even get into I'll get to the Shawnee thing. Shawnee didn't get caught up in anything except her own pomposity. She felt like opining on a subject, and she felt like being patronizing and authoritative, like she was qualified, like her opinion was more qualified. It's obviously not more qualified in the first place, and in the second place, it was really rotten. It was full of logical and factual errors. So she made a bad argument.
That's the way people do things now. I watched the creationists get booed and laughed off stage in university. Were they bad arguers? Yes. Were they...
So they were bad arguers. So you just said something, okay? This is what logic requires. You just said they were bad arguers, yes. Okay, now let's hear the rest.
Logical? Yes.
Were they illogical? Yes.
Did we allow them a chance to speak? No.
Okay, so how did you know they were bad arguers and they were illogical? How did you know that? I guess they did speak then, didn't they? So they started speaking, and they started saying something like, I love Blue Blanky. I think Blue Blanky is so special. And these people who showed up to listen to a debate or an argument or something else basically said, well, you know what? I didn't come here to waste my time listening to somebody talk about their Blue Blanky. Okay? I'm not hanging out here. So it's either they go or I go. So me as the audience will walk out if these fucktards, I'm not going to waste my time listening to a fucktard talking about his Blue Blanky. I'm here to watch people have a rational argument. So you just concede the point. We were able to talk. They talked complete nonsense, and people said, I'm not here to listen to somebody talk nonsense. So until they can make a rational argument, they really shouldn't have the podium. There's nothing wrong with that.
What's that?
Yeah. So what? So let's critique the whole university experience then. Why don't you invite a bunch of kindergartners in, and you can have them tell you about what reality is. So have a bunch of kindergartners explain to you how Hulk Hogan is God, and or whatever else they would come up with. And you want to waste your time listening to that, that would be your prerogative. But you know what? I bet you can't sell tickets to it. I bet you can't. I bet you can't get an audience to show up for your event where everybody just talks out of their ass. So anyway, fuck you, weasel. Again, try to make an argument where you actually accurately paraphrase an argument instead of these generalities. Actually come up with a quote and explain how what somebody else has said, what the statement they've made is somehow incorrect and inaccurate, and you can logically demonstrate that. Until you actually do that in one of these arguments, you're just a fucking weasel. So, enough said on this jackass. So, let's see, how long was this video? Yeah, I might as well cut them into parts. So, yeah. Alright, I'll do Shawnee separate.